A pickup just launched at around $27,000, undercutting the Ford Ranger, the Toyota Hilux, and the Bide Shark. And it's not electric, and it's not a hybrid. It's a diesel. In a market where every headline is about batteries and plug-in powertrains, the company that just landed the cheapest, most competitive pickup in this class did it with a fuel-injected engine and a torque curve. Not a kilowatt-hour rating. And the twist is, who built it? A Japanese company most casual car buyers can't name, that decided 100 years ago it didn't want to compete with Toyota on passenger cars at all. Before we get into it, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you can watch videos like this first. Everybody's attention has been locked on the Ranger, the Hilux, and Bide's plug-in hybrid Shark as the future of the pickup segment, and while that fight dominated headlines, Isuzu quietly rolled out a pickup that undercuts all three on price without giving up torque, four-wheel drive, or a modern cabin. So here's what this video covers. We're going to figure out how a company most people only vaguely associate with trucks built 100 years of expertise that makes this price possible. We're going to break down exactly what $27,000 actually buys you in engine, design, and technology. And this is the part that matters even if you never buy an Isuzu. What it means that the cheapest serious pickup in this fight bet against electrification instead of chasing it. If that's useful, hit like. It genuinely helps this reach more people. To understand why Isuzu could pull this off when other manufacturers are watching pickup prices climb every year, you have to go back more than a century to a company that never tried to be Toyota in the first place. Isuzu's roots go back to 1916 in Japan, when the Tokyo Ishikawa Shipbuilding and Engineering Company took its first steps into automobiles, later joined by the Tokyo Gas and Electric Industrial Company. Japan's auto industry barely existed at the time, so in 1918, the company struck a technical tie-up with the British automaker Wolseley, specifically to learn vehicle manufacturing from a company that already knew how to do it. That partnership paid off in 1922, when production of the Wolseley A9 passenger car began in Japan. And then Isuzu did something that quietly defined the next 100 years of the company. It moved away from passenger cars. Starting around 1924, the company accelerated its focus on truck manufacturing instead, and by 1937, the company considered the direct predecessor of today's Isuzu Motors had been established. In 1949, it took the name Isuzu Motors Limited. From that point on, while companies like Toyota kept expanding across a huge range of passenger vehicles, Isuzu went narrow and deep: trucks, buses, commercial vehicles, and diesel engines. That's why the Isuzu name doesn't carry the same recognition as Toyota among everyday car shoppers, but it's also exactly why the company's position inside the commercial vehicle industry is genuinely strong, not a footnote. Here's the root cause underneath everything else in this story. Isuzu spent a century refusing to compete with Toyota on Toyota's terms. Instead of trying to build a full passenger lineup and treating trucks as a side business, it went all in on diesel engines and commercial vehicles and let that become its entire identity. That single strategic decision, made generations ago, is the reason Isuzu today operates in more than 150 countries and regions, holds the #1 market share in commercial vehicles across 47 of them, runs a global service network spanning around 3,812 locations, and moves roughly 670,000 vehicles overseas. A company that specialized this deeply for this long doesn't need to reinvent diesel engineering to build a competitive pickup. It's been quietly building that exact expertise the entire time. That distinction between broad and narrow is worth sitting with, because it's easy to assume broad automatically wins. Toyota spread its engineering budget, its factories, and its brand attention across sedans, SUVs, hybrids, minivans, sports cars, and trucks all at once, which builds enormous scale but also means no single category gets the company's undivided focus. Isuzu spent the same 100 years pouring essentially all of that same kind of attention into one narrow lane, diesel engines and commercial vehicles, and came out the other side with a depth of expertise in that one lane that a broader competitor simply can't match pound for pound. dollar for dollar spent on that specific category. Narrow and deep beat broad and shallow in exactly the category Isuzu chose to specialize in. Thailand is where the pickup side of that story actually took shape. Isuzu began building its presence in Thailand's commercial vehicle market back in 1961, and over time Thailand stopped being just a market where Isuzu sold vehicles and became a genuine production and export base. The original D-Max arrived in 2002, giving Isuzu's light commercial vehicle business a real international identity, and D-Max and MUX vehicles built in Thailand have since been exported to more than 120 countries. By August 2025, Isuzu's cumulative light commercial vehicle exports out of Thailand had crossed 3 million units. In the fiscal year ending March 2025, Isuzu's global LCV sales sat around 230,000 units, about 46,000 sold inside Thailand, close to 184,000 sent to export markets, and that number climbed to around 253,000 units the following fiscal year. Thailand alone accounted for roughly a 37% share of that country's LCV market in FY 2025, holding around 35% between January and September of 2025. Translate that into plain terms. Roughly 1 out of every 3 light commercial vehicles sold in Thailand wears an Isuzu badge. So let's actually get into how 20-plus years of building the same basic pickup translates into a price competitors can't match, because it's just cheap undersells what's actually happening. First, Isuzu already owns a complete manufacturing ecosystem in Thailand, factories, suppliers, and a full production system built up over decades, so there's no need to stand up an entirely new manufacturing base for each new D-Max generation the way a brand new competitor would have to. Second, the D-Max isn't an experimental first attempt at anything. It's been in continuous production and refinement since 2002, which means Isuzu has had over 2 decades to learn exactly which components need to be built tough, where costs can be trimmed without hurting durability, and which features customers are actually willing to pay extra for. That's institutional knowledge a brand new pickup program simply doesn't have yet, no matter how much capital gets thrown at it. Third, the same basic D-Max platform gets adapted across dozens of markets rather than engineered from scratch for each one. Different engines, different equipment, different comfort and safety packages depending on the region, but the fundamental vehicle stays largely common underneath. That shared foundation is a direct cost lever, the same logic that lets any manufacturer spread tooling and engineering costs across a much larger production run instead of eating that cost on a single market's volume alone. And fourth, Isuzu has been deliberately restrained about turning the D-Max into a luxury vehicle just because newer technology exists. It gets a touchscreen, a camera system, safety features, and a comfortable cabin, but the company's stated priority stays on the actual job description of a pickup: a reliable engine, the ability to handle real weight, and durability across rough terrain, rather than piling on premium features that mostly drive up sticker price. There's an important nuance worth naming here too. Isuzu Thailand has been explicit that this isn't a race to the bottom discounting strategy. The company has talked openly about protecting brand value and resale value and avoiding aggressive discounting. So the goal was never simply cheapest pickup on the lot. It's pricing the D-Max at a level where the buyer genuinely gets a strong diesel engine, a practical cabin, real working capability, and proper off-road hardware for the money, without Isuzu torching its own long-term brand value to win a short-term price war. That distinction matters more than it might sound, because plenty of manufacturers have chased volume with aggressive discounting only to watch resale values collapse a few years later, which ends up costing loyal customers real money the moment they try to sell or trade in. A pickup buyer, especially a commercial or fleet buyer, thinks about total cost of ownership across the entire time they'll hold the vehicle, not just the number on the initial sticker. Protecting resale value while still hitting an aggressive starting price is a much harder balancing act than simply slashing margins, and it's a signal that Isuzu is playing a longer game than a one-time price headline suggests. And that brings us to what $27,000 actually gets you. because the spec sheet earns its price rather than apologizing for it. The 2026 D-Max Via-Cross keeps Isuzu's traditionally tough look while modernizing it. A larger grille up front, a redesigned bumper, LED lighting, wider wheel arches, and new alloy wheels. The Thailand spec version runs around 5.28 meters long with roughly 240 millimeters of ground clearance. Genuinely serious numbers for clearing rough terrain without scraping the underside. It's a double cab, meaning real seating front and rear, with a full open bed for cargo behind it. Inside, Isuzu has clearly moved past the bare-bones work truck feel of older generations, a large touchscreen, steering wheel-mounted controls, and enough modern convenience features to make it usable as a daily driver, not just a job site tool. The version launched in India specifically gets a 10.3-inch touchscreen and a 360-degree camera system, and higher trims across markets add a power driver's seat, cruise control, and upgraded seating for longer trips. The engine lineup is where Isuzu's diesel pedigree actually shows up, and it varies meaningfully by market. In Thailand, the D-Max runs a new 2.2-liter D-Di Max-Force diesel producing around 150 PS and 400 Newton-meters of torque, paired with an available 8-speed automatic and a 4WD option. That torque figure matters more than the horsepower number for a working pickup. Torque is what actually moves a loaded truck uphill or across rough ground. And any decent engine can move an empty bed easily. The real test comes fully loaded on a climb. The 8-speed automatic keeps the engine in its efficient range at highway speed, instead of revving unnecessarily high. Above that sits an available 3.0-liter D-Di Max-Force turbo diesel, producing around 190 PS and 450 Newton-meters of torque. Aimed at buyers who need to haul heavier loads or spend more time on rough roads and highways, offered with 6-speed manual or automatic gearboxes. That larger engine runs a variable geometry turbo, which adjusts how it feeds air into the engine as speed changes, delivering usable power at low speeds specifically for uphill climbs or sudden acceleration. Paired with common rail fuel injection that meters diesel precisely for better efficiency. In India specifically, the V-Cross runs a 1.9-liter diesel producing around 163 horsepower and 360 Newton-meters of torque, with 6-speed manual or automatic options, and a 4x4 system that redistributes power to whichever wheels still have grip on mud, sand, or slippery surfaces. Worth explaining why Isuzu bothers offering 3 different engine displacements across 3 different regions instead of standardizing on one global powertrain. Because it's not indecision, it's precision targeting. A market like Thailand, where the D-Max does heavy-duty commercial and agricultural work daily, benefits from the larger 3.0-liter option's extra torque headroom. A market like India, with different fuel economy expectations, different road conditions, and different tax structures tied to engine displacement, gets a smaller 1.9-liter unit tuned for that specific regulatory and economic environment. Building one universal engine and forcing every market to accept whichever trade-offs it happens to make would actually cost Isuzu sales in markets where the fit isn't right, so the added engineering complexity of running multiple displacement options pays for itself in each region's sales numbers. Now, worth being precise about that $27,000 figure. Because it's not one fixed global sticker price, it shifts by country, variant, engine choice, and local taxes. Treat it as a representative starting price in a specific market rather than a universal number, the same way most pickup pricing works once you account for regional specification differences. And this is where the competitive picture actually gets interesting. Because the D-Max isn't fighting in an empty field. Stack it against the Ford Ranger, and the Ranger's real strength is that Ford refused to treat it as a pure work truck. Strong engine options paired with genuinely modern technology, a premium-feeling cabin in higher trims, big screens, and real driver assistance tech. Appealing to buyers who want SUV-like comfort wrapped around pickup capability. The trade-off is price, which climbs meaningfully in higher trims, forcing buyers to decide whether that extra technology is worth paying for versus getting the core job done more simply. The Toyota Hilux competes on almost the opposite pitch, decades of proven reliability, a massive global dealer and service network, and resale values that stay strong across many markets, which matters enormously to a buyer planning to keep a truck for a decade or more. The D-Max and Hilux genuinely overlap here. Both brands built their reputations on commercial vehicle durability and diesel expertise, so the real competition between them isn't about horsepower, it's about long-term reliability, maintenance costs, and what the truck is actually worth years down the road. Then there's the Bide Shark, and this is the competitor that actually changes the shape of the whole conversation. While the Ranger, Hilux, and D-Max all come from traditional pickup thinking, the Shark is a plug-in hybrid, a gasoline engine paired with electric motors and a battery, capable of strong combined performance and some amount of pure electric driving range, wrapped in a modern tech-forward cabin with connected features. That combination genuinely appeals to buyers who want pickup capability without fully giving up on newer electrified technology. But a hybrid system raises its own set of questions. A buyer in a remote area, someone regularly covering very long distances, or anyone without easy charging access may still find a straightforward diesel pickup the more dependable option day to day, while a buyer based closer to a city gets real upside from the plug-in hybrid's efficiency and electric-only range. That split is exactly the gap the D-Max is trying to occupy. Diesel engine. Real torque, 4WD, a strong body, and straightforward practicality, without pretending to be something it isn't. Line all four up, and the picture gets clear fast. The Ranger leans into features and a modern driving experience. The Hilux leans on decades of proven reliability and reputation. The Shark leans into plug-in hybrid technology as the actual differentiator. And the D-Max leans on traditional diesel capability and competitive value. There's no single universal winner here. For some buyers, technology matters most. For others, it's resale value. For others, hybrid efficiency. And for others, a diesel pickup that just handles daily work and rough roads without complication. Now, the honest section. And there's real nuance to work through here that a clickbait framing tends to flatten. Start with the biggest one. This is not an electric pickup. The engine lineup across every market variant is diesel, turbocharged, common rail, torque-focused diesel. The same category of powertrain Isuzu has built trucks and buses around for a century. If you came into this expecting a battery electric competitor to the Shark, that's simply not what Isuzu built here, and it's worth being upfront about that rather than letting a catchy headline imply otherwise. What Isuzu actually built is arguably more interesting than an EV headline suggests, a company that looked at the industry's rush toward electrification and plug-in hybrids and made a very different bet, that a huge number of pickup buyers, especially in commercial and rural use cases, still want proven diesel simplicity over battery complexity, and that betting against the trend could be just as competitive as chasing it. Second, the market data doesn't support destroying the competition, and it's worth being straight about that too. Take Australia, one of the most competitive pickup markets on Earth. In 2025, the D-Max sold around 26,839 units there. In that same period, the Ford Ranger sold around 56,555 units. And the Toyota Hilux sold about 51,297, meaning Ranger sales were nearly double the D-Max's, with the Hilux comfortably ahead as well. Isuzu has not overtaken either of them in a major head-to-head market. The honest picture is that the D-Max remains a strong, credible competitor while still trailing both established rivals in raw sales where they go head-to-head directly. Third, Isuzu's actual strength isn't dominating any single market, it's showing up meaningfully across nearly all of them. Break down that 253,000-unit global LCV figure from the fiscal year ending March 2026, roughly 60,000 units in Thailand, about 18,000 across other Asian markets, around 54,000 in Africa, roughly 46,000 across Oceania including Australia, about 23,000 in the Middle East, around 17,000 in Europe, close to 15,000 in Latin America, and another 20,000 spread across other markets. No single region carries the whole story. The strength is genuinely distributed, which is a different kind of advantage than topping any one country's sales chart, but it's also a real one, because it means Isuzu isn't dependent on any single market staying strong to keep the business healthy. Fourth, betting against electrification carries its own long-term risk, not just short-term upside. If hybrid and electric pickup demand keeps growing the way the Shark's arrival suggests it might, a manufacturer that stayed purely diesel could eventually find itself explaining a gap rather than a value proposition. Isuzu isn't ignoring new technology entirely. The company has talked about hybrid options in its broader lineup, but the D-Max's core identity, at least for now, is unapologetically diesel first, and that's a bet on how slowly buyer preferences actually shift in the commercial and rural segments Isuzu knows best, not a guarantee that bet pays off forever. There's a fifth point worth naming honestly too. Shared platform pricing has its own hidden trade-off. Building the same basic D-Max and adapting it across dozens of markets keeps costs down. But it also means the vehicle is fundamentally a global commercial vehicle design wearing regional trim, rather than a pickup engineered from a blank sheet for any single market's specific preferences. A buyer comparing the D-Max against a competitor, engineered more narrowly for their exact region and use case, might find that competitor better tailored in small but meaningful ways. Even if the D-Max wins on raw price, cost efficiency and perfect market fit tend to sit in tension with each other, and Isuzu has clearly chosen to optimize for the former. So here's why this actually matters, even if you'll never personally buy a D-Max. When a manufacturer with a century of diesel and commercial vehicle expertise proves it can still land a genuinely competitive pickup at a lower price point without an electrified powertrain, that's a real signal that not every buyer and not every market is racing toward electrification at the same pace the loudest headlines suggest. Rural buyers, commercial fleets, and markets with thin charging infrastructure represent a massive, still underserved segment of the global pickup market, and Isuzu's approach is a direct bet that segment is bigger and more durable than the industry's electrification narrative gives it credit for. And that's really the law underneath this whole story. Sometimes the biggest disruption in a market isn't a new technology at all. It's a company refusing to chase the trend everyone else is racing toward, and getting rewarded for staying disciplined about what it already does well. Isuzu didn't beat the competition on features or battery specs. It beat them on a century of narrow, deep expertise nobody else in this fight has spent as long building. There's a broader pattern worth pulling out of this specific story, one that shows up across plenty of industries beyond pickups. The loudest trend in a market isn't always the trend every customer actually needs served. Electrification dominates headlines because it's genuinely transformative for a huge slice of buyers, but transformative for many doesn't mean universal for all. And a company willing to keep serving the segment the industry's attention has drifted away from can find real, durable demand sitting there, largely uncontested. Isuzu isn't fighting Ford, Toyota, and BYD on their chosen battlefield. It's fighting on a battlefield it already understood better than any of them 100 years before this specific pickup ever got announced. So here's the actual question, and drop your honest answer in the comments. Is Isuzu's diesel first, no-frills approach the smarter long-term bet for the massive slice of the pickup market that isn't ready for electrification yet? Or is betting against the direction the entire industry is heading in a strategy that eventually runs out of road? There are real, defensible arguments on both sides, and the honest answer probably depends less on this one pickup and more on how fast electrification actually reaches the rural and commercial buyers Isuzu has spent a century building its whole business around.